The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. He spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." But others said, "No, he just looks like him." He said, "I am." They brought the one who was once blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see." So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a sinful man do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him, since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and you are trying to teach us?" Then they threw him out. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshipped him. The Gospel of the Lord. This is a day of great paradox. How is it that we can have this color of rose, this color of joy, in the midst of Lent, which is of the color of purple, a color of purification, of sacrifice, of penance, a color of mortification, of preparation? Isn't purification and penance supposed to cause bitterness and tension and angst? Well, I think precisely by injecting this rose color into the season of Lent, the Church makes a very powerful point. Penance and purification, sacrifices, those can very well accompany even joy. Joy can be a part of our lives no matter what time of the year that it is. Joy can be a constant in our lives, even in the midst of suffering or trial or difficulty. I'm reminded of a little girl named Haley Dews, who's from the Burg. And she's at a children's hospital in Philadelphia now, undergoing all sorts of advanced treatments, because she has several abnormalities of her heart and of her lungs. And they have a Facebook group that you can join so you can keep tabs on how she's doing. And I've been keeping close watch on that. And it seems like day after day, it's something else. Some other complication, some other fluid buildup, some other procedure or difficulty. But every picture of her on the Facebook group is of her smiling. How is that possible? How can someone undergoing so much suffering day after day still find happiness and peace? I'm reminded also of the souls in purgatory, frankly. The instant we die, we receive right away our judgment, eternal life in heaven or eternal life in hell. Those who are destined for heaven, if they have need of further purification, if they did not accomplish enough penance in their earthly lives, they undergo that purification in purgatory. But that soul in purgatory is not embittered by the fact that it has to undergo purification, because it sees heaven in the distance. It sees heaven ahead. And so the soul in purgatory is eager to undergo those purifications. And we can have the very same attitude today in the way that we approach Lent. Easter is only 2 weeks away. Our redemption is at hand. It's very close. We can see it. And so we eagerly go about our purifications, our penances, our sacrifices, so that we can enter into that redemption more fully and more perfectly that is so close to us today. That cross that we have our eyes trained on throughout the season of Lent, it also, believe it or not, is a great source of happiness for us and joy. How is the crucifix a source of happiness and joy? It's an instrument of torture and death and pain and suffering. I think it can be considered a source of happiness because of what it means, because of what it says. Each one of us here today can look at that crucifix and say, look at what He did for me. Look at how much He loves me. That causes me great hope. He loves me that much. He underwent that. And we can each of us say that in order to find a source of joy no matter what is happening in our lives, any time of the year. Also, this season itself, the season of Lent itself, is a source of happiness and joy for us. It helps us to discover what true happiness is, because we tend to, throughout our lives, accumulate all of these attachments and material things. So many of these superficial things that we try to root our happiness in. But through the penances and sacrifices of Lent, the layers of those get peeled away, they're purified, they're burned away by the burn of sacrifice and of penance to reveal the truer source of happiness, the source in our spiritual lives. Pope Paul VI said, "Technological society has succeeded in multiplying the occasions of pleasure, but finds great difficulty in giving birth to happiness. For happiness has its origin elsewhere. It is a spiritual thing. Money, comfort, material security, etc. may often not be lacking. We accumulate those as best we can, feverishly, as much as we can. But nevertheless, despite these advantages, boredom, suffering, and sadness are frequently to be found, supervening in the lives of many people. As those things get parsed away, we see that our spiritual lives are the source of the happiness that all of these other things pale in comparison to. We can never be really happy if we are not united to the cross of Christ, the source of perfect redemption, peace, and happiness. St. Josemaria Escriva is one of my favorite saints. He says, "We as Catholic Christians, we travel along the way of self-giving, the cross on our shoulders, a smile on our lips, and light in our hearts." For that little girl, Haley, I think she's able to be so happy in the midst of all of her sufferings because she doesn't have those material comforts that you and I have. She's suffering greatly every day. And so that, in a sense, so to speak, forces her to root her happiness in a truer thing. And I think that is the constant presence of her family. Her mother and father have been by her side all the time. Her father, Mr. Dews, he works in a demolition company. He's in charge of dynamite. They do explosives of environments to open the way to construction projects. And he's been with her the whole time. And all of his co-workers, they accumulated all of their holiday days, all of their sick days, all of their vacation days, and they gave them all to him so that he could be with his daughter at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. And they did that with no grievance, with no bitterness. They did that completely living out the spirit of Lent, a spirit of generous almsgiving. Almsgiving that becomes a way of purifying ourselves of our attachment, our feverish clinging to the things in our lives. You and I will get a chance to do the same type of thing today. We have the collection for Catholic Relief Services, where we ourselves could be co-workers for the poor to relieve their suffering so that they can see where true happiness lies. True happiness rooted in our love for them and our presence to them by our charity. And I encourage you to give generously to that. The man in the gospel today also encapsulates all that we're about this season of Lent. He was anointed, as all of us were at our baptism, by the clay to heal his blindness. He received the light of Christ. All of us did so at our baptism through that little baptismal candle. His eyes were enlightened and opened so that he could see again. But all of this wasn't merely for physical sight. He was anointed and enlightened. We were anointed and enlightened from that font in order to have the senses of our faith opened up. He received physical sight so that he could see true happiness with the eyes of faith. Through the trials he underwent with the Pharisees, through our own trials, our sacrifices and penances of Lent, the eyes of our hearts are opened more widely to see the Lord and our spiritual lives as the truer source of happiness. So that at the end of that reading, the man said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshiped him. Through our penances, through our sacrifices, through our intensified giving and love for the poor, we too have our eyes opened to see the Lord more fully and to worship him more perfectly at this Easter season. I conclude with another beautiful quote from St. Josemaria Escriva. As Holy Week and Easter draw near, so do forgiveness, mercy, divine compassion, and a superabundance of grace. A little while longer, and the mystery of our salvation will be consummated. If at times we have been afraid of penance and atonement, we will be filled with courage at the thought of how short is the time involved and how great the reward, a prize entirely disproportionate to our own little efforts. So let us cheerfully follow Jesus to Jerusalem, to Calvary, to the cross. After all, is it not true that as soon as you cease to be afraid of the cross, of what people call the cross, when you set your will to accept the will of God, then you find happiness, and all your worries, all your suffering, physical or moral, pass away.